The group leaders had to use smelling salts to get him alert, and as he lay in the floor he was surrounded by them, but everything was fuzzy. He couldn't make out who they were or anything. They made him lay there till an ambulance got there. As they rushed him to the hospital, then they admitted him right away. He had a bad concussion, so they kept him there for 5 days to keep an eye on him. Afterwards they took him back to the holding place till he went to court. Well, today is the day, he thought to himself. He was really worried about what they would do to him for running away. As they walked him in the courtroom and took a seat till they called his name, the bailiff said, "The state versus Jimmy Bullion." As the judge was looking at the papers and then glanced up at Jimmy with a mean look on his face, fear came over him like a huge tidal wave. He was so scared. The judge spoke up and said they were going to put him in Maryland training school. Jimmy didn't know what that meant, but he was still scared all the same. As the group leader brought him back to the holding place and said, "Pack your things, you're out of here." So Jimmy did what they told him. A police car pulled up to the holding place and the cop put Jimmy in the car with his things. As they drove him to Baltimore, to what looked like prison to him, there was big tall chain link fence with barbed wire on the top, and all the buildings had bars on the windows. He was scared to death. Jimmy had never seen anything like this, and he didn't understand why no one wanted him or loved him. He had so much pain inside, and it was too much for a kid his age to handle. Not that anyone cared. All he ever wanted was to be loved like the other kids, but he knew it would never happen. Later that day, Jimmy found out that his mom had sent him to Maryland training school. It was a bad place for bad kids, and none of the kids there liked him. They hit him and made fun of him so much that he would go hide under the ping pong table. As he sat there, Hell's Bells came on the radio, and he thought to himself, why couldn't they just leave him alone? He wasn't looking for trouble, but it always had a way of finding him. As Jimmy lit a smoke and was listening to the song, a black guy kicked him in the face just for the hell of it. Mad as hell, Jimmy got up and went to the bathroom to wipe the blood from his face, and he felt his teeth. All his front teeth were loose. Jimmy was so furious, so he went back to the day room and looked for the guy. He was under the ping pong table, just lying there. So Jimmy took his lighter and walked to the other side of the table. As he reached under the table with a piece of paper, he lit it and set the guy's afro on fire. It burned all of it off. Jimmy was in more trouble now. The group's leaders made him work the rest of the day scrubbing toilets till it was time for lights out. He felt it was all worth it though, because it made him feel better. All the bad kids there would pick fights with Jimmy every day, and he really hated this place. He thought how he would get out of there, but he knew it wouldn't be easy. Plus, on top of that, if you try to run when you're outside, they let all the kids in your unit beat the shit out of you. There were 80 kids to a unit, and he knew he couldn't outrun all of them. Plus, on top of that, they take away everyone's home visits if you try to run. Then they will let the other kids beat your ass because you made them lose their home visits. So he knew that was out of the question. All he knew is he hated this place and he wanted out. 6 months later, he thought he was going home as they told him to pack his stuff. So Jimmy did so with the speed of a bullet as he stood by the door and waited for them to unlock it. After they did, they walked him to a van. There was another man there. He opened the side door and told Jimmy to put his stuff in. So Jimmy did what they told him. They told him to get in the front with them, and as he got in, they locked the door so there was no way out. It was a long ride deep in the woods. As Jimmy sat there, he wondered where they was taking him. He spoke up and said, "Where are we going?" The man didn't answer. By now, Jimmy was really worried about where he was going as the man driving turned off the main road onto a dirt road. He kept on driving for what seemed like forever. All kind of thoughts were racing through his head as he thought maybe the man was going to kill him. Thinking that thought didn't scare him at all, as he thought to himself, it couldn't be no worse than the hell he has been going through. They finally pulled up to a big lodge-looking building and stopped. The man driving the van got out and walked around to Jimmy's door to unlock it. As Jimmy got out, the man opened the side door and told him to grab his things. About that time, another man with a lady walked up and said hello to Jimmy. The man spoke up and said, "I've heard a lot about you." His name was Mr. Best, and he was huge. He looked as big as Hulk Hogan, but Jimmy wasn't scared of him. He was really a nice man, even though you wouldn't think so to look at him. He was Jimmy's group leader. The name of Jimmy's group was Coyote. Mr. Best brought Jimmy over to some logs that they had made to sit on and told him to sit there. The logs were forming a square with a fire pit in the middle. Jimmy thought to himself, where everyone is and where was he going to be living? He didn't see any houses or trailers, all there was the lodge. This place was much different from where he had just come from, and he didn't see any bars or anything. He didn't know what to think. Then the door opened and out came Mr. Best and Jimmy's group. They all sat down and introduced themselves to him. Jimmy asked Mr. Best, "Where do we live at?" He said, "In the woods and tents." Jimmy thought to himself, this isn't good either. Come to find out, they had to build the tents themselves. In the days to come, Jimmy found out it was really hard work. They had to build their tents from trees and canvas. It was no easy job either, but Jimmy thought they were kind of cool, but he still didn't want to be there regardless. Jimmy rebelled a lot. He also would fight Mr. Best sometimes for days on end, but Jimmy didn't give up even though Mr. Best looked like the Hulk. He never hit Jimmy, although Jimmy tried to get him to by hitting him and spitting in his face. The only thing Mr. Best would do is hold him down so he couldn't run away, but that never stopped him from trying anyway. He couldn't understand why he got sent off just because he wanted something to eat. One day the group leaders had a meeting, and when they asked Mr. Best how his group was doing, he spoke up and said, "Well, besides Jimmy, that kid beats anything I've ever seen," as he explained to them. "He has so much fire in him, no matter how hard I try to get him to do the program, he fights it. I will tell you one thing, the kid must have been through hell because he's not scared of me, anything or anyone. I've had to hold him down so many times I've lost track of him. That kid has more heart and balls than anyone I've ever met in my whole life. To be honest about it, I really can understand him. He is so kind, but you get him mad. Let me tell you, he has a temper like you've never seen. He doesn't ever give up no matter what I did to try and calm him. I really feel sorry for what he must have been through to make him this way." They all agreed he wasn't a bad kid, he just had so much pain, and he was done so wrong that it made him scared to trust anyone. Jimmy did learn lots of outdoor skills there, and they even went on canoe and hiking trips. Jimmy did like those. He had lots of fun on the white water and going over the falls with the canoes. Jimmy still wanted to go home when he did get with the program because he finally realized that was the only way for him to get out, so he done what he had to. When he did get a home visit, they brought him to his mom's house. As Jimmy got out of the van, he was glad it was summer. They waved goodbye to Jimmy, and he waved back as they left. Jimmy wasn't thinking straight. He was so excited he walked to the door and knocked, but no one was there. He thought, how could this be? His mom knew he was going to be there that day. So where was she? Jimmy was only home for the weekend and he had to go back. His face was red as fire. He was so disappointed and mad because his mom wasn't there. That just showed him what he already knew, which was his mom didn't give a damn about him. As he sat down on his trunk and cried, the pain was too much. What was he thinking? He didn't know how he could even have thought she could change, and it hurt like someone stabbing him in the heart with a flaming dagger. He was so hurt and mad he just started working. He left his trunk there not knowing what to do. He didn't have any money or food. It was very hot that day. It was 98 degrees and humid. After he walked about 6 miles, he got to the mall. Then he thought to himself he could at least get some water to drink and rest in the shade inside. Jimmy learned one thing, and that was how to survive in the woods, so that's what he did till Sunday when he was supposed to go back to the group home. He was free and he wasn't going back. He was so hungry though, so he thought he would try to find some kind of work so he could buy some food. After he left the mall, he started going down the side streets looking for a job cutting grass or something, when out of the corner of his eye he saw a lady cutting her lawn. So he walked up and said, "Hi, my name is Jimmy. Can I cut your grass for you so I can buy some food?" he asked. The lady turned towards Jimmy and turned the mower off. She spoke up and said, "I don't have the money to pay you." So he turned and was about to walk away. "Wait, Jimmy, but I do have some food. I will tell you what, I'm all done except that little stripe," as she looked him over and thought to herself, this kid looks homeless. His clothes were dirty from sleeping on the ground. The lady asked, "Would you like something to drink? You look kind of thirsty," she said with a kind smile. He answered, "Yes, ma'am." She said, "Stay right here, I'll be right back." He nodded to her and sat down in her driveway, then waited for her to return. A bit later, the lady came back out with 2 tall glasses of ice and 2 cans of Pepsi Cola. She set them on the trunk of her car. She said, "I'll get us a chair." Jimmy sat there quietly till she returned. She went to get 2 lawn chairs, and as she rounded the car he looked up at her. He couldn't get over the puzzled look on her face. They both opened the chair to have a sip and a drink. Jimmy began to drink his soda down all with one drink. He was very thirsty as she watched him with amazement. She replied, "If I drank it that fast I would have a brain freeze." She could tell something was not sitting right with him, and it really bothered her to the point it made her eyes tear up. She wasn't about to ask Jimmy to work for her as he had already looked so exhausted and hungry. She asked him, "Where are your mom and dad?" Jimmy got scared. He didn't know what to tell her because he was ashamed of how his parents treated him. Before he could answer, she stood up and said, "I'll be right back. I'm hungry. I think I'll make us a sandwich." Even though that was a white lie. As she turned and walked away, she could not hold back the tears any longer, as they began streaming down her face like a flood. She went inside to keep him from seeing her cry. She went in her bedroom, where her husband was watching TV, and she told him about Jimmy. She couldn't stop crying as she tried to explain to him how he asked to mow her grass to get some food to eat. So he helped her put some sandwiches together, and then he went out with her as she wiped the tears from her eyes to meet Jimmy. They both walked over to Jimmy, and she sat back in her chair. Her husband leaned on the car as they handed Jimmy a sandwich. Jimmy ate it before they even got a bite of their own sandwich. The lady's husband asked Jimmy, "When was the last time you ate something?" Jimmy said, "Friday." It was now Sunday, and as they talked he told them what had happened to him. The man looked at his wife with a disgusted look in his eyes. All of a sudden the lady got up. She was trying to push the tears back, but no such luck. She couldn't believe her ears as she broke down in tears. She felt so bad for Jimmy. They both did. They couldn't see how someone could be so mean to their own child like that. She walked toward the front of her car and wiped the tears back again as she asked her husband to come over for a second. So he did. As they talked for a bit, he said, "We need to give him some money," and she agreed with him. As he walked back over to Jimmy, he pulled out his billfold and gave Jimmy $50 so he could buy some food, plus made him 5 tuna sandwiches. She put them in a bag for him with a 6-pack of soda. Jimmy offered to work for the food and money. They told him, "No way is this our gift to you, Jimmy." As he was about to leave, the lady grabbed him and he was scared. He didn't know what she was up to till she pulled him close for a hug and squeezed him tight. As emotions overwhelmed Jimmy all at once, the woman could feel his body shake. Jimmy had never had a real hug. All he knew was getting the hell beat out of him. Even though it made him cry, it filled him with joy all at the same time, just to feel love for once in his life. They both put their arms around Jimmy and cried with him. Afterwards they said their goodbyes, and Jimmy went on his way. He was thinking to himself, why does all his family hate him? Jimmy wondered if the group home would come looking for him, but they never did. So now he was almost 18 and truly on his own. He had no family to turn to for help or anything. He wondered to himself if he would ever be loved. What he didn't know was things were about to get worse than even he could ever imagine. His world was about to fall apart. By this time, Kenny and his girlfriend had got married. Michelle, Kenny's sister, had gotten married too. She had married one of her brother's friends named Gordon, but everyone called him Mink. The reason for that was he worked on a mink farm. They lived in Pittsville in a trailer on Glass Hill Road. Bebe, which was Michelle's nickname, told Crow he could stay with them, and so he did. He got a job at a chicken plant hanging chickens. Crow had to hitchhike back and forth to work. That's the only way he had to get there, so he would leave 3 hours ahead of time just to make sure he wasn't late, and walk to the highway Route 50 to Thunderide. Lots of times he ended up walking most of the way. It was about 20 miles to get to his job in Berlin. He also had to have a knife that was sharp to cut open these huge boxes of chicken. The boxes were 7 feet tall. The only thing he had was a knife that Mink gave him, which was a survival knife with a compass on the handle and the plastic case. This went on for a few weeks. Well, it was the weekend. Kenny and his wife Crystal had come over to visit with them, and it was very hot that day. Mink had mentioned, "Damn, it's hot. You all want to go swimming at Timmy's pond." They all agreed and headed to Mink's car as they all got in. One thing they liked about it was the water was clean and clear. As they got there, they all got out and started walking down a long trail till they reached the pond. When they got to the water's edge, Crow peeled off his t-shirt and took a run as he dove in. Kenny was right behind him. The water felt refreshing as they both swam underwater for a ways. They all loved this place. Mink, Bebe, and Crystal liked to go there just to cool off on hot summer days. Even though neither of them could swim besides Crow and Kenny. He spoke up and tagged Crow. He said, "You're it," as he dove under the water. Crow was right behind him. None of them had a clue what was about to happen. There was a big pine tree that had fallen into the pond. Kenny and Crow loved this because there was a place where you could swim under the log. You could also walk from the water's edge just beneath the water, and you could walk out almost to the middle of the pond, though the farther you went it was much deeper. When Crow stood on the log, the water line was up to his neck. Mink had waded in the water up to his chest, but as far as he would go. Bebe had a raft, so her and Crystal decided to walk out on the log. They both were holding onto the raft, and after they were about halfway out, they were laughing, giggling, and carrying on. Then the unexpected happened. Somehow they both fell off the log. In a panic, they both let loose of the raft and sank beneath the water's surface. They were drowning. Kenny and Crow were still playing tag. They were still underwater and had no idea what had just happened. Kenny's head surfaced the water first, and he saw his wife drowning. He hurriedly swam over to save her, but was having no luck. About that time, Crow came up and saw what had happened. As he swam to Bebe, and the raft wasn't far from her. So he dove back under, and from underwater he grabbed her by her legs and put her back on the raft from underwater. She was really shaken, and when Crow came up to get his breath, she jumped frantically off the raft right on top of him. He couldn't even catch his breath. In a panic, she had pushed him all the way to the bottom. She had hold of him tightly, and he had to hit her to get loose as he hurriedly went to get some air before she drowned him. He went right back to get her, and he put her back on the raft. This time she stayed on it, thank God, because all that time Kenny still was trying to save his wife with no luck. She was in a panic, and Crow wasn't far from him. As he made his way and went back under the water, he grabbed Crystal by her ankles and lifted her feet up to the log. Then he broke the surface and got her by the hand as he swam beside her and walked her back to shore. Crow saved Bebe twice, saved Crystal all in a nick of time. Crow never felt like a hero. He would have done the same for anyone. They didn't even thank him or anything that he could remember anyway. He didn't really care. He was just glad no one died. He didn't care if anyone thought he was a hero or not, even though he really was and always would be in God's eyes. If you don't think that's a hero, ask yourself, how many lives did you save when you were 17 years old? To be continued. This book is a true